Welcome to this presentation for the Global Mastery Summit. I'm Dr. Symeon Rodger, and you are here for this presentation, which is Self-Mastery in an Age of Transformation. I should have put transformation in quotation marks because what we mean here is an age of chaos, which is what we're in. So how is this going to work for us? Well, let's go find out. So one Saturday morning in the spring of 1998, I got a phone call from this man. This is Father George. Father George was a priest of the Eastern Orthodox Church, and he was about 90 years old at the time, and he was lying in hospital. Now, he'd been in hospital for a few days. It was nothing terribly serious. One of his many, many illnesses being that age and having gone through the horrors of World War II. Anyway, what he said was simply, get over here now. And when Father George said something like that, you tended to jump. So it was off to the hospital I went. And when I got to his hospital room, there were a couple of medical people in there. There were some friends. Nothing urgent was going on, but he shooed everybody else out. And then he asked me to come and sit. And he said this to me. He said, he recounted what had happened to him that morning. He said, the walls of my hospital room fell away. I was here just, in the hospital room, and suddenly I was somewhere else. The walls of the hospital room fell away, and I found myself in a beautiful meadow, listening to music of unearthly beauty, and I was penetrated by an unimaginable love. Now, that's a pretty short version of what he experienced and of what he said about it, but it gets the point across. So eventually, this vision faded, of course, and he found himself once more in his hospital room, which was when he called me. Now, that experience nurtured Father George for the rest of his life, which was only another year and a quarter or so. And despite its overwhelming nature, he never asked what the experience was. He didn't need to, because his tradition told him what the experience was. It was it was completely obvious. And much like people who've gone through a near-death experience, he had no reason to question what it was because it was perfectly obvious to him. And since then, I've met several other people who have also experienced the divine love this way in a mystical vision as a kind of gift. But it's also something we see present in the majority of near-death experiences. Now, we're not here today to talk about near-death experiences or particularly about mystical visions. But all of this is to say that human potential is well known to us if we care to look. And it's beyond imagination, literally beyond imagination, beyond the ability of human language to describe. So we're much more than we appear to be. And the world around us is much different than our senses tell us. But the question that concerns us here, though, is how can we develop our whole potential as human beings? Physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual. How do we develop it? And as we'll see, the various ancient traditions of transformation, the ones that can prove they actually got results, they have just one answer about where to start. Humanity's evolving consciousness, this is a quotation from Eckhart Tolle. He says, a still relatively small but rapidly growing percentage of humanity is already experiencing within themselves the breakup of the old egoic mind patterns and the emergence of a new dimension of consciousness. So this is a claim that we run into quite often today, the claim that humanity's consciousness is evolving. It's evolving particularly rapidly right now. And there is certainly some evidence for it. In fact, there are definitely signs of a shift. People are beginning to prioritize their inner state over outward success. People are resigning from the workday grind that society has imposed upon them. They're creating enterprises to help others, build community, and build mutual prosperity, rather than just engaging in the blind search for profits. Harmony and beauty are regaining their value in this world of linear functionality. And for that matter, author Steven Pinker has documented increases in human freedom, prosperity, health, and even kindness, dramatic but consistent increases over the past couple of centuries. The data is in. There is no doubt this is the case. However, if you ask anyone today if humanity and the world in general is on a positive trajectory, that's not likely what you're going to hear, is it? Because there are serious forces arrayed against us. I spoke last year at one of Lama Tantrapa's summits about the looming meta crisis that confronts civilization today. The meta crisis, and I didn't originate the word, but it is a collection of simultaneously emerging challenges on numerous fronts for which we have no clear answer. We waffle between denial, overwhelm, and the vain hope that yesterday's solutions will solve tomorrow's problems. Spoiler alert, they won't. So, if there were ever a time when we desperately needed to move towards self mastery to regain our agency in life, that time is upon us. However, if we leave the sort of macro strategic level that we're talking about here and come down to the day to day reality that we all share, we see that the forces arrayed against us are indeed formidable. We have the moneyed interests, the billionaire class, that has arguably bought and paid for the political process in some parts of the world, that has introduced polarizing narratives to distract the population while they hoard its wealth, and which has built disruptive technologies that transform daily life but also lead to unforeseen social downsides while affording them even more avenues for spreading divisive narratives. And yet, for all that, these factors are far from the ones that have the biggest impact on each of us individually. Many of the really the most important factors that have the biggest impact on us individually are the ones that most of the population is completely or largely oblivious to, such as these: our own subconscious assumptions about ourselves and our world, the assumptions that limit us individually and keep us stuck, our trauma history. And trauma history exists on several levels for each of us. There's collective trauma or cultural trauma, if you wish. There's familial trauma. There's individual trauma, all of which keeps us repeating the same unhelpful patterns in life. And we're all familiar with this. Then there's religion. And when I use the term religion here, I'm using it only to describe certain types of spiritual approaches, which are actually usually a dumbed down version of an ancient mystical tradition. The ancient traditions actually worked. Modern religion does not. The Newtonian worldview, that's perhaps the biggest one and the most ignored. What is the Newtonian worldview? Well, it's our continued unquestioning subservience to an understanding of reality that basically frames each of us as, well, someone being hunted in the Hunger Games. And even though this worldview has been scientifically disproven, it was scientifically disproven over 100 years ago. So, in this era of seemingly unprecedented challenge to each of us, how do we attain a degree of self mastery that enables us to not only live a powerful, excellent life, but to help others as well? How do we do that? Well, it's going to take some doing because, after all, Western civilization is in fact new to this, right? I assure you that my parents at the age of 40 had never even heard of Tai Chi or Qigong. In fact, until the end of his life, my father could never keep straight the words yoga and yogurt, both equally foreign to the world of his upbringing. So we arguably today, though, have more tools available to us, more transformational tools than we know what to do with, more transformational tools than at any time in recorded history, and more advice about how to use even one tool than we can possibly digest. Yet, that's not the real issue, is it? Instead, perhaps it's time to ask ourselves, are we willing to go deep? Are we willing to go beyond our search for symptom relief and for comfort? Are we really? Are we willing to get uncomfortable, to take on the level of commitment to make deep progress? If we are, then we quickly find that many of the tools out there, especially the ones that have stood the test of time, have vastly more potential than most of their practitioners think. As an example, Today we're going to take a look at Tai Chi because many of you will be familiar with it. I could have easily used Qigong, I could have used yoga, but let's say that you've just learned the bare physical movements of a Tai Chi form. For sake of argument, it doesn't matter which form, what style, don't care. What will you do now? Will you just blindly repeat the form, hoping it will somehow help you? Or will you constantly search for new forms and new interesting things? Will you go wide rather than deep? I hope not. I hope someone will introduce you to the deeper aspects. So let's have a look at some of those aspects. Breathing. First of all, if you're doing this Tai Chi, how are you going to breathe? Are you going to use normal abdominal breathing or reverse abdominal breathing? Or is it a combination of both? And when will you use either one? Will you be matching your breath to the movements? In other words, will you match the inhale and exhale to a movement? Well, the answer to that is actually more complex than a simple yes or no. Over time, you can begin to sense the ambient energy in the world around you. You'll sense your whole body inhaling and exhaling with you. And you'll notice the flow of chi within yourself. Yeah, it takes time to get there, and it takes introspection. Now, if you're lucky, someone may show you how to use this breath to cleanse and rejuvenate your own bone marrow and to pull chi from the world around you into your organs and fasciae, making you much less vulnerable to blows and impacts of any kind, and also dramatically improving your health. And finally, you may begin to do what the ancient Taoists called combining energy and spirit, one of the tradition's most important longevity approaches, and that goes far beyond what we have time to talk about here today. But as you can see, all of this goes beyond what we normally think of as mere breathing techniques. We're talking here about complete psychophysical integration. And breathing is only the start. This requires delving into other key elements. And then there's your posture. So let's talk about posture and alignment. Finding alignment is mainly done through standing practice, embracing the tree or zhanzhuang. And finding that alignment is one thing, but maintaining alignment as you move, now that's a whole other matter. And that's where systems like Tai Chi really shine. Now, as your physical alignment improves, your energetic alignment improves too. And you'll get better and better at redirecting incoming force. Now, practicing alignment will help make your lower body enormously strong. Okay. Your lower body will become very solid and very strong. And as that happens, you'll notice that tension drains out of your upper body, leading to a much more stress free life. So, what's happening here, of course, is your body is regaining its energetic balance, something maybe you haven't experienced since childhood, if you even remember it. Then there's the mental alignment that follows the physical alignment. And mental alignment is something you're unlikely to experience without physical alignment first. Now, in Tai Chi, as with Qigong, it's inevitable you'll hear about the lower dantian, your body's main energy storage and transfer area in your abdomen, roughly the equivalent of the Hindu navel chakra. Now, how do you develop the lower dantian? Many people have absolutely no idea, and they'll just vaguely talk about it. But first, the dantian, which is there, you'll learn how to move from the dantian. In other words, you'll learn how to make each movement of the form originate from the lower dantian. That's the first part. Now, over time, you'll begin to feel a power, a strength in the lower dantian you've never felt before. The most important aspect, though, and the one that almost no one will ever tell you about, is what happens when you begin to trust the power expressing itself through the lower dantian and surrender to it. And that goes, again, way beyond what we're able to talk about here tonight. Now, your first impression of Tai Chi movement will be that it's circular. And you're right, though only in part, because upon further inspection, you'll notice that much of Tai Chi's movement is actually spiral movement. And a circle is two-dimensional, but a spiral is three-dimensional, like a drill, like a helix. This spiral or helical movement as a pattern, as a movement pattern, it multiplies the power of any offense or defense. And soon you begin to notice spiral movement in everyday life, and you begin to notice where you can apply it. Maybe you're helping somebody move and lifting heavy boxes. And of course, spiral movement also detoxifies your body more efficiently than any other movement pattern. But the journey doesn't end there because, of course, at some point in your Tai Chi journey, someone is bound to hit you with a phrase like distinguishing yin from yang. On the most exterior level, that's just noticing where your weight is distributed between your 2 feet. On a deeper level, you'll eventually begin to notice whether your whole being is too yang, for example, too tense, too much energy in the upper body, off balance mentally and emotionally. Then you can use the Tai Chi form to intentionally become more yin. And this relates to the classic description of a Tai Chi master as steel wrapped in cotton. On the other hand, there may be times when you feel weak, vulnerable to your environment, and you need more yang energy. Maybe it's winter and you're indoors, but you still feel cold. Well, you can also use Tai Chi for that. You can generate more yang energy. You can become cotton wrapped in steel instead of steel wrapped in cotton when the situation requires it. Through your long practice of Tai Chi, you'll become a master of putting your mental attention inside your body. You'll be able to sense your internal physical state more and more accurately. You'll also develop the ability to observe your own mind itself, your own consciousness. And what mystical traditions have taught people to do from time immemorial, you'll learn to do in the moving meditation that is Tai Chi. And at this point, the form itself may seem less to be something that you do and more something that expresses itself through you. And that's just taking the example of Tai Chi. So, is it really true that we're surrounded by endless tools but no system? Well, as I've attempted to show you here, Tai Chi is essentially a complete system of self mastery on its own, but only if a person goes deep. Tai Chi translates to grand ultimate for a reason, right? Yet few teachers can convey its full potential to you. And let's face it, that isn't the actual problem. Because the teachers who can are hampered by students who just want symptom relief. That's one of our biggest problems. After nearly half a century of studying the ancient world systems of self mastery, from the mystical tradition of the Christian East to Tibetan Buddhism and Chinese Taoism, I'm more convinced than ever that humanity in the 21st century is heading towards a new synthesis. And indeed, we desperately need such a synthesis. Although it's unlikely to be a single synthesis and more likely to be a whole series of them. And what they'll likely have in common is the integration of modern science with ancient knowledge and a series of paths to self mastery to accommodate people of differing mentalities and starting points. So, this synthesis of this that's going to be the way of the future, what will these self mastery systems of the future look like? Well, although we don't know that precisely, I would suggest a few things. I would suggest that they will be evidence based, and they need to be evidence based. There is more need for this than ever because as a species, we have basically a choice. We can either content ourselves with ideology, in other words, some prepackaged view of reality that is always going to be reductionist and always going to lead us down the wrong path, or we can go in the direction of evidence based, which actually, paradoxically, is what these ancient systems of self transformation did. They were extremely evidence based. So I would also suggest that any of these new syntheses are going to be very somatic in their approach, very body centric. And that's really essential and extremely helpful for modern Western people who need to get out of their heads and into their bodies, sometimes for the first time. Since ancient traditions emphasize that the goal you seek is not outside you, and they all start by telling you you really have to go inside, you have to put your mental attention inside your physical form. That is the universal starting point. And they'll start building. I would suggest too that what's going to happen is we're going to start building new cultures of mastery within our existing societies. Cultures or environments that help rather than hamper progress. Think perhaps of traditional Japanese culture and how it has been able to find the transformational aspect of any human act, anything in daily life, whether it is flower arranging, the tea ceremony, or calligraphy, to name just a few of the classic ones. So we have to develop cultures of mastery, ways to adjust our own culture so that instead of the culture, society, and the rhythms of society around us hampering us and crippling us and pulling us away from our attempts at self transformation, they will actually help us for a change. So if you'd like to know more, please consider our free Partner Qigong course. Yes, Partner Qigong. Why? Why would you do partner qigong? What if you don't have a partner? Don't worry about it. That's not the point because practicing with someone else is much more fun. So whether we're talking about qigong or tai chi, this course is a bit of a crossover. Practicing with someone else is not only much more fun, it yields far better results far faster. And you'll get instant feedback, for example, to know how good your alignment is or is not. And guess what? The other person, they need zero experience to be your partner. Zero. So you don't need to go looking for someone who already knows Tai Chi, Qigong, whatever, doesn't, they don't need to. All they need to do is be someone who is interested in finding a way to relax on a deeper level. And you need zero experience to start this program too. This is for anybody because we will teach you everything you need to know in this program, in this free program. And this is a program or an approach I've used in live workshops, and it just goes over phenomenally well. You'll become much more relaxed with a partner than you will alone. So if you're interested, because after all, it's free, just email us at dsrclients@gmail.com and we'll send you the series of 11 short videos. It'll blow your mind. Hope to see you there. I'm Dr. Symeon Rodger. Hope you've enjoyed the presentation. If you have any questions, please let me know. That's it for now.